Welcome to episode 12 of Your Life is the Medicine. I'm your host, Sonny Miles. Thank you for being here. I today want to talk about palliative care and sort of how palliative care what it has taught me and how it has shaped my own life and my own humanity. And I've talked a little bit about this previously in sort of sharing that part of why I'm doing the work that I am now and trying to create my own kind of way of practicing medicine and really leaning into what healing feels like to me is that I practiced palliative care essentially full time in the hospital and in a clinic. And I was spending every single day talking to patients about what mattered most if time was short for them and I wasn't living what mattered most to me. Like I I have always been a horse person. Horses are my love, and I had 4 horses at home that I didn't have the time to do anything with except take care of. I didn't ride, I didn't really spend time with them, and so I had 2 little kids at home and I was just I was surviving. And so palliative care and the work of every day talking to people about what mattered to them, really like that incongruence between what I was teaching other people and working through with other people and the fact that I was only half following my own advice. Like I knew that I had to change that. And so that's how I got here. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about palliative medicine today and what it what the practice of palliative medicine might do for all of us. And I will also say that palliative medicine or palliative care is perhaps the most misunderstood and perhaps feared or it's a specialty that makes people worry, that makes people nervous, in part because often it is dealing with serious illness or death and dying, and in part because it is misunderstood. And so for those of you not familiar with palliative care is a newer specialty in medicine, and it's really a team of it's designed to be an interdisciplinary team. The goal of palliative medicine is to support people who have serious illness, a life-threatening diagnosis, a life-altering diagnosis, and people who are approaching the end of life. And so we talk about what matters in life. We talk about what it's like to cope with and live with a serious illness. We talk about what it's like to face the end of your life. We talk about what it's like to think about dying and what dying would look like ideally if we could choose. We can't always, but we try to help people get as close to what they would like as we can. And we talk about advanced care planning. And so palliative care can happen in the hospital setting, palliative care can happen in a clinic, and palliative care can even happen. There are many home-based palliative care programs where someone might come to your home and help support you through those conversations and also manage any symptoms from either the disease or the illness. So that's sort of what palliative medicine is. For me, palliative medicine is the medicine that I didn't know that I needed and that I didn't know I would love. So as I've shared before, I really grew up with integrative medicine. Like I grew up learning about alternative and complementary ways of healing. I grew up reading about the blending of native medicine and conventional medicine. I grew up reading Andrew Weil's book, Spontaneous Healing. I was exposed to the world of natural healing through my mom from the time that I could remember. And as I think I've shared before, when I was in high school, my mom went back to school and did a master's in traditional Chinese medicine. And so then I had a lot of exposure to the entire system of traditional Chinese medicine, the herbs, the acupuncture, Tuina, et cetera, et cetera. And so integrative medicine was sort of part of the fabric of my life and the fabric of who I was long before I became a physician. But palliative medicine, I didn't even know existed. And I didn't have a lot of exposure to death and dying. And so I didn't, it just wasn't part of my consciousness until medical school. And then I was fortunate. UCSF has an amazing palliative care program and team. And so I really got to see palliative medicine in action from an amazing group of healers and humans. And I was intrigued. And to me, I can remember being a resident, and I'm guessing this was my first or second year of internal medicine residency, and admitting a woman who was in end stages of lung cancer, and she hadn't told her son. And there was some denial of the severity of her illness. And I just remember feeling that part of our job was truth telling as physicians. And I would say that I have learned over time that you have to be very skillful in your truth telling, right? That you want the truth telling to be in a way that people can receive, and that is has the least sort of traumatic effect possible. But I sat with that woman for a long time, and I this was in the days that we did overnight calls. So I was working a 30-hour shift, and I sat with her and I talked to her, and I just had this real draw and could really feel the pain of what she was going through. And so that was sort of my introduction to palliative care. But I really didn't think palliative care was for me until I kind of got out in the real world of medicine and saw how often honest conversations about outcomes or about the possibility of dying or about what people really wanted, how often those conversations weren't had because they were hard or because we lacked the skills or it just didn't fit in the time allotted for taking care of patients. And so after practicing for a couple of years, I made the decision that I wanted to have the skill set of being able to skillfully navigate truth telling and being able to skillfully navigate difficult conversations. And it has really been a profound journey. And I've gotten so much more out of it than I ever dreamed I would get out of it for my own life. And even my practice of kind of whole person medicine in my private practice, I would not be the physician and healer that I am without all of the grief and pain and difficult conversations I've walked with patients over the last decade. And so I am palliative medicine in a way. Like palliative medicine is at this point woven into the fabric of who I am deep inside. And so how does palliative medicine relate to the podcast title of Your Life is the Medicine? And I would say that the ethos of palliative medicine, which I would say is quality of life and living what matters and making choices knowing that time could be shorter than we hope. That lens benefits each and every one of us. That lens allows us to make choices, very intentional choices about how we live each and every day. And so for me, palliative medicine helps us live a life that is medicine for our souls and our bodies. It asks a question like what's important? And if I died tomorrow, next week, next month, 10 years, when I'm 90, how do I make this life what I want it to be? And so it's also that each of us will die, as much as we don't like to think about it. And being prepared as we can be, because I don't think you can, most of us are not going to be quote unquote fully prepared to die, but doing the work of preparing to die, whether that's the logistics or the spiritual work, it gives us freedom to live. And so mortality, thinking about our mortality, honoring our mortality, and making choices, keeping our mortality in mind, is the medicine. So let me tell you a little bit about kind of what I've learned from palliative care. And again, my palliative care practice is very shaped by my integrative medicine practice as well, and some of the contemplative care practices that I have learned over the years from Roshi Joan at the Upaya Zen Center in Santa Fe, and even as part of my integrative medicine fellowship from Koshin and Chodo at the New York City Zen Center for Contemplative Care. And so I'm really grateful for all of the amazing teachers that I've had who teach about death and dying and intentional living, because it's not as readily available in mainstream culture. It's not as easy to find. And so, what has palliative medicine taught me? And this is in no particular order. These are the thoughts I was brainstorming as I was thinking about this episode. And I would say that number one, health and time are not guaranteed. And one of the things I'm always struck by is, even when someone's been given a short prognosis, say 6 months, we often think that those 6 months are going to be 6 months with the same amount of energy and capacity as when we were well. And often when time becomes shorter, your health is not as robust, and you have less energy and therefore are less able to do things that matter. And so time, we all know, is not guaranteed, though we often behave as if it is. But even our health is not guaranteed. The ability to navigate the world in the body that you have in this moment, however healthy or not as healthy it is, that state of health is not guaranteed. And so when we put off things that are important and require a lot of energy or cognitive ability to do, like going on a really important trip or going to see someone or taking care of estate planning and things like that, oftentimes people unfortunately arrive in a situation where they haven't done the things that they wanted to do, and they no longer have the energy or ability to do them. And so it really is that neither time nor health is guaranteed. And so really, doing the things that you can while you can do them. I remember seeing Frank Ostaseski, who's a Buddhist teacher and has a beautiful book called The Five Invitations. And I remember him speaking at a contemplative care conference on dying. And he says this in The Five Invitations as well, but he said something like, we are arrogant enough to think that we can do all of the work at the end of our life when we are not feeling well. And it really is true that we often think that we will be able to take care of everything that matters at the end. And often we're not able to do that. Number two, mindset is a powerful tool and really underlies resilience. So mindset is a powerful tool that underlies resilience. What do I mean by that? The most resilient patients I met are the ones that are able to grieve what they've lost and then adapt. So as an example, I met a man a few years ago who had been a singer, and whose life was singing. And he had head and neck cancer and was getting chemotherapy and radiation, which to his throat, which is a really brutal treatment often. And when I was talking to him, he said, "Well, that's okay. I'll play a different instrument instead. Like I'll get really good at the guitar." And again, like many people I've met, understandably are so devastated by their loss that they can only focus on the loss. And the people who are able to find joy in other things, or find joy despite what they're going through, find meaning despite what they're going through, their resilience is incredible to watch. And so that is something we can some I don't want to be too glib, right? It's not easy to just change your mind and change how you feel. And yet it's something that we have the power to do. We have the power to adopt a more resilient mindset. We have the power to grieve and look for other things. And so again, mindset is incredibly powerful in how resilient we are and in how we live and die. Number 3 is that though mindset is incredibly important, you can't just have a positive attitude your way through a serious illness. The toxic positivity, and over palliative care physicians here, we only want to hear the positive. We don't want to talk about the negative. And while there's a lot of reasons behind that, my own experience is that you have to hear all of it. You have to grieve, you have to rage, you have to feel all of it. And you can have a positive mindset, but you have to be able to adapt. You can't just have a positive mindset and ignore everything difficult and challenging and painful that's happening. That doesn't help healing. That actually causes a lot more pain at the end. So while a mindset is incredibly important, we also need attunement. We need to be able to feel what we're feeling. We need to be able to take in all of the hard things and be with them, and then set down what's appropriate to set down and hold on to the positivity or hold on to the beauty. Number 4, grief is, in my experience, almost always part of serious illness and dying. But so are love and joy and even gratitude. There's so much grief in serious illness and in dying, and our culture doesn't talk a lot about grief or really teach us how to navigate grief. Often we're taught, like, you just grieve for a while and you get through it and then you're sort of back to normal. And that's not how grief works. Grief shapes our inner fabric. Grief often shapes who we are. And when someone is struggling with chronic, it doesn't even have to be an illness that might kill you, but even a new diagnosis like diabetes or COPD, like a lung disease, something that affects your ability to live your life, there is grief with those. We grieve what we lost. We grieve the loss of function. We grieve the life that we thought we would have and the things we thought we would be able to do. We grieve as people get sicker, they may grieve their role in their family. They may grieve their role in society. They may grieve losing the person that they were. Many of us have identities very wrapped up in our function. For me, I very much identify with my cognitive function. I also was an athlete, and so being physically active is a really important part of my identity. And when people are not able to do those things in the same way they did before, there is almost always a lot of grief. And there's also beauty and joy in seeing what is present or what they've had, and can even be gratitude in what what the experience, however difficult, the gifts that it has the possibility to give, or the learning or the meaning that it has the possibility to bring to the forefront of our lives. I took care of a young man many years ago now who was my age, and he had lung cancer that ultimately took his life. And he, when I first met him, he and his wife had so many plans to buy another vacation home, to do all of these things. And over the course of his illness, they really prioritized spending time together. So they didn't have the trips, they didn't have the vacation home, but they really prioritized being together, and she prioritized showing up as much as she could with him and for him. And as he was getting sicker, he told me that he was so grateful for the time that they had together, and that he, of course, wishes he could have lived. And he was grateful that they had this very intense, beautiful time together that they would not have created in the same way if he had not gotten sick. And so their serious illness and death and dying bring pain and grief and rage and suffering, and they can bring beauty and joy, profound love, courage, and even gratitude. So the next one, living in the face of death takes tremendous courage. And what I mean by this, and that same patient, to me, when I think of him, was just a tremendous example of profound courage to really try to craft his life in the way that he wanted, even as his body got weaker and weaker and he was able to do less and less. And yet he showed up for his wife in the ways that he could. He showed up for his daughter. He showed up for himself, and he kept going the best that he could. Through pain, through setbacks in his treatment, through so much, he had so much courage to keep going, to really try to keep living, and to try to live and prioritize what mattered to him. And so really trying to continue creating your life in the way that nourishes you in spite of a limited prognosis or a serious illness takes tremendous courage. And it's not a courage that we talk about in society, and yet it is every person living with serious illness who gets up and keeps going every day is a tremendous display of courage and heroism in my mind. Next, it's okay to feel what you feel. It's okay to be afraid or not afraid. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be despondent. It's okay to have moments of joy. It's okay to feel it all. And sometimes we don't want to feel it. And so it is all okay. It is all okay. What's important is that when the feelings come up, we feel them and not push them down, and that we tend to the feelings. My experience of being a physician in the healthcare system is that much of the care is focused on getting the body better, and the care is not this focused on supporting the inner journey of living with serious and chronic illness or facing death and dying. And palliative care does focus on the inner journey, and yet we're also focused on symptoms. And so while we try to spend more time on the inner journey, it's still not the same skill set as a therapist or a psychologist or someone whose expertise is the inner journey. And for me, that's what I love. That's what all of my kind of work and learning outside of my conventional training has been, digging into that inner journey of illness and of healing, and tending to and finding resources that support that inner journey of healing in whatever way healing looks, is essential. It is we need it. Ideally we would have a healthcare system that was able to both help the body heal and the mind and the emotional body and the soul or the spirit, whatever words you would like to use. But that isn't the system we have. And so knowing that and really knowing that there's a whole other skill set and a whole other set of resources that may be beneficial, whether that is, if you're part of a religious community, whether that's a religious authority or whether that is a therapist or maybe a coach even, or a wise elder, right? There's so much wisdom in people who have lived. And so knowing that we need this other support as we go through an illness or a serious event in our life or as we face death and dying. Another thing that I've learned is that we cannot face serious illness or death and dying alone. And yes, there are some people that have to because of their circumstances, but everybody needs help as bodies decline and we reach the end of our lives. We have this cultural value of being independent and not needing help from anyone, and it creates a lot of suffering. We humans are interdependent. We need each other. We need community. We need people to help us as we get ill. And many people, I hear this over and over, that they don't want to be a burden to their families. And we cannot make it through the last phase of our life without some kind of help. We just can't. I would say the next thing is that talking about and planning for death and dying is liberating. And so knowing that you have paperwork in place, that things are taken care of, that you have chosen to live in a way that you don't have unfinished business or unfinished conversations or relationships that need healing. Taking care of all of those things is incredibly freeing, and it opens up a lot of energy. And in my experience, it often decreases suffering at the end of life. Many people that I've seen are suffering because they haven't been able to tend to broken relationships, to have conversations that have been or said things that have been left unsaid. And so the more that we can live in a way where we don't have unfinished business, or we have the least amount of unfinished business possible, it's incredibly freeing. Lastly, I would say dying does not look in real life like it does on TV. And I know that sounds ridiculous, and yet the dying process itself sometimes is very quick, and sometimes it's many days or weeks. And many people haven't seen someone die, in part because we tend to have dying happen in hospitals or facilities, or tucked away where it's not visible. And a lot of people don't want their kids to see someone dying, again, because we have this idea that it's traumatic and it's harmful and it's bad in some way. And so we often don't have an idea of what dying actually looks like. And dying can be very slow. Dying can be many days or many weeks. And it's important, if you're in a situation, that you ask questions about what it looks like and find people to give you sort of anticipatory guidance and help talk you through that process. And lastly, what palliative medicine has given me most profoundly is the reminder every time I talk to someone else about dying, to live what matters, to live in a way that aligns with my values, that fuels my passions, that honors the people that I love. As a mom of two young kids, my kids are 6 and 8, I don't think that I'm not at a place that if I died tomorrow, I would just be like, oh, that's fine, right? Like I want to be here for my kids to grow up. And yet, I also know that the choices that I have made very intentionally about how I've lived and the risks I've taken or not taken and what I have tried to give myself and also my family. And so I don't think that just because we do all the work, we always get to a place where surrender is easy. Surrender to dying is easy. I think depending on where we are in our season of life and what's going on in our life, there's likely going to be a wish for something to be different. I have met people who do not have that wish anymore, who really truly are at peace and know that they have lived well and their time is done. That's not where I am. So I'm not this episode and these thoughts on death and dying and palliative medicine are not to say that you should be in a particular place. They're simply to give you food for thought and to share what I have learned from the incredible people that I've gotten to work with over many years now. So choose what matters in the ways that you can, right? Like we have to have both a short-term lens for our life of like what are the things I need to get done, the bills I need to pay, et cetera, and a longer-term lens of like what matters, and how am I each day living more and more in alignment with what matters. And so I hope that this episode has provided food for thought. I know I ramble a bit and I appreciate you listening to me. I wanted to share, I think I've shared this before, but one of my favorite quotes by Rilke is that love and death are the great gifts that are given to us. Mostly they are passed on unopened. And my hope is that by talking about palliative medicine and the work of palliative medicine and my own experience talking with and taking care of people who are seriously ill and people who are dying, that we open the gifts at least a little bit more of love and death. So thank you very much.